So today I'm gonna talk about the diseases and illnesses um, and well-being in the trenches. First on, I wanted to give some context of the World War I that began after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, and his murder catapulted into a war across Europe that lasted until 1918. And now that this citation gives us some context, now we know that the World War One was a confrontation that occurred between great potencies that were divided into alliances, which we already kind of talked about, like while the presentations of my classmates that they have developed some larger context, but it was basically between the Triple Alliance or the great powers, the Central Powers, which were German Empire, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, and the Triple Entente, which was the United Kingdom, France, and the Russian Empire. Now we know that the war began in 1914 and it ended in 1918. And the causes of the World War One were basically proceeding in a political nature way, and obviously some competition of privileges and technological advances, and also it could be revenge, military alliances, economical and stuff. But it was basically a constant competence between these countries. And um, now we know that we're going to talk about the trenches, which was a military warfare or a military strategy called the Schiffenplan, which was kind of to defend or attack in France that were stated. And it was basically a neutral fighting, but it was a confrontation between countries, and it because it was really stable as a way of defending themselves. They developed the trenches, which was a long barrier that created fronts that were supposed to attack and defend the the limit of the countries, their territories. And the trenches were all down to the west coast to Switzerland. The trenches were almost 475 miles long, which was almost 80, 80 800 kilometers long. And now the trenches concentrated many men, but it was a small space and it created insanitary conditions because of it, because it was the length and the length. First of all, it was really long, but it was really thin and small space, and that stretched a lot of kilometers. And so a lot of soldiers lived in there, but their conditions were unsanitary, and the weather participated in them because it wasn't actually a luxury. It was not um, some new tunnel or a really technological barrier that protected them from everything. No, it was something that was exposed and not very well made, and so this occasioned them to have unsanitary conditions, and it occasioned growth and development. But it was really easy for the diseases to grow and like pass on to other soldiers. And some of these diseases were epidemics of typhus, malaria, diarrhea, yellow fever, pneumonia, influenza, and this forced out outbreaks and catastrophes. And so now that we know the weather participated, we can move on to disease and illnesses. And so, because soldiers were exposed to the cold, because eventually the war could come to winter, their equipment was not really advanced, so it didn't protect them enough, and it was not waterproof. So, because of the cold, the equipment didn't protect them to interfere in their circulation, and it affected the skin. It created nerve damage, and because of the skin could be infected, it could cause gangrene that could lead to amputation. So the transfer was due to the weather conditions and due to the lack of circulation that affect the skin. Now we're gonna talk about the trench fever, which was transmitted by the lice of bites. That it was a plague, and it was related to typhus. But yeah, typhus is a disease, but the trench fever was another bacteria that had different symptoms. But it was basically a fever that was transmitted by lice bites, and the symptoms were that it made the body ache, uh, muscle pain, and you felt all weakened. So you weren't actually so um, you weren't able to fight the war. And so it was a trench fever, and then the trench mouth with, which was caused by soldiers, some soldiers who had encounters, which eventually they would because there were times where people felt desperate and lonely, and so sometimes they could feel attracted to themselves, and so this caused the acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis, which is a gum disease that was caused by the overgrowth of normal mouth-feeling bacteria, that could lead to bleeding, ulceration, pain while eating, sloughing of the gum membrane, etc. But teeth could fall out, and they struggled every day with this because it was not very common, but still a thing, and so they weren't aware, but they caused this, and the we know now that the trench was sanitary and some plagues live among the soldiers, but yeah, some diseases were spread by all of these rats, lices, cockroaches, insects, whatever animals, and yeah, it was basically transmitted by that. But some other diseases that my classmates already talked about were mental, and that is how this is related. But this disease and illnesses brought up to really good advances in um, the medical way, and so yeah, this is my topic. And lastly, this is my preferences. Thank you for watching.